Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and this is 15 games that replaced other games. This is a comparison video to a degree. This is me taking a look at 15 instances of a game that I feel replaced another game. That's probably not the title of this video or the thumbnail because I'll have to figure out the title later, but that's the point of this video. This is not a pure comparison of two different games. This is meant to be direct replacements. If you follow the channel, you probably already know that I have a series on the channel called Play This Not That, where I, or sometimes we, take a look at two different games that have reasons to compare them, and then talk about which one we like more or different or all those different things. We go into those, we do, but this is not that video. This is not me taking Endless Winter versus Lost Ruins of Arnak or whatnot and trying to compare them. These games should be so close in terms of where they are, what they were doing, and how they are directly comparable, that my goal here is that not a single one of these should you be able to question, really? You compare those two games? Which is a comment, whenever I do a Play This Not That video, there's always a small subset of people that are like, those games are comparable? The rest of the people, I mean, are commenting on the comparisons, but there's a few people who are like, why would you ever compare them? That's not the case here. We're going to go into that. And also, I'll give you, starting off the bat, I'll give you an example of two games that are not on this list, which is Azul and Santorini. Azul and Santorini are games I was considering. The problem is, these are games that I think the original does it better. Santorini has Santorini and Santorini New York, and I will always recommend Santorini over New York. We also have Azul, and then Azul Queen's Garden, Azul Summervillian, and Azul Stained Glass, whatever it is. But you have all those games. And over here, I think the original Azul does it best. And so these games were not replaced, and so they are not on the list. This is not what the video is about. And like I said already, this is not a Play This Not That. If you want some solid Play This Not That videos, you can check out my Endless Winter versus Lost Ruins of Arnak versus Dune video. You can check that out if you want to see a comparison there. Or alternatively, a comparison between Gloomhaven and Oathsworn, where Meg, Devin, and myself go into a comparison of those games and spend 50 minutes trying to compare the two games and figure out which ones we like more. Or Cthulhu Death May Die versus Mansion of Madness. None of these are here. With that long disclaimer aside, let's go into what this video is, starting off from the very beginning, and we'll probably, from the necessity of box size, be tackling smaller boxes first, but starting off the bat, we have Cockroach Poker. I'm trying to figure out whether I grab the box first or talk about the game, but we'll figure it out. Cockroach Poker is a game that I highly recommend that you take a look at if you like bluffing games. It's a fun little bluffing game which you are going to be passing cards to other players with the goal of them having 4 of the same type, and you're constantly lying to each other about what you're passing, and it's up to the player to call or not call what you passed, or effectively calling your lie or not calling your lie correctly. Cockroach Poker Royale, on the other hand, basically takes the exact same game, removes one of the animal types, and instead adds in a bunch of royal cards, which mixes up the experience and adds a little bit more pizzazz into the mix. This one is a little harder to track down. Devere Games has reprinted Cockroach Poker, and you can get your hands on that one more easily. Royal is a little harder to track down, but I think it's worth it. I think this game takes the same basic engine of the game and just adds that drop of extra spice on top that makes it more worthwhile. I still recommend Cockroach Poker as a better introduction to the genre, but this one is a solid one that I think directly replaces Cockroach Poker and does it better. This is also a good time to talk about the fact that these 15 games are my opinion. If you disagree with my opinion, let me know in the comments down below. Tell me where I'm dead wrong. Tell me where you've played both those games and you think, how could I possibly have that opinion? That game is nowhere near better than the original game. I'm curious to know, because I think some of these will be generally agreed upon, and others I think are an interesting conversation with a whole bunch of differing viewpoints, which brings me into my number 2. The Crew was directly replaced, in my opinion, by the Crew Mission Deep Sea. The Crew Quest for Planet 9 was the original. It gave you cooperative trick-taking, and it did so incredibly well. People loved the Crew, and people loved it for good reason. It took trick-taking, an interesting genre on its own, and then made a cooperative which had never been done before, and was done to, well, great effect. People liked it. And then the Crew Mission Deep Sea came out and said, we're going to take that exact same game, but instead of having you have binary goals, because the goal is to try to win certain tricks, so I can win the pink 9 or the green 3, instead of having purely it be about the numbers, we're going to give you more interesting goals. It took the exact same game and said, we're just going to make it better. Now, I still have the Crew in here just in case. I have them all wrapped in the same box. But I think the Crew Mission Deep Sea, there's not a time on Earth that I would ever recommend the Crew Quest for Planet 9 over Mission Deep Sea, which to me directly replaced it. From there, we have Shards of Infinity versus Star Realms. If you haven't played these two games, I don't want your comment about how they're not comparable. They are directly comparable. Now, this is one of the times, this is the first time on the list where it's from a different company. In fact, many of these games, by the nature of the fact that I'm saying they are directly comparable, and they're not like, this versus that, many of these games, if not all of these games, oh, there's a tricky one there, almost all of these games, with one other exception, are from the same company. Okay, the same company putting out another version of that game. So Cockroach Poker was replaced by Cockroach Poker Real. The Crew Mission Deep Sea, Quest for Planet 9 was replaced by Mission Deep Sea from the same publisher. And yes, Cockroach Poker has a different publisher, but that came after the fact. In the case of Shards of Infinity, we have Wise Wizard Games put out Star Realms, and then we have Stoneblade Entertainment put out Shards of Infinity, which directly replaces the Star Realms formula of deck building and adds just an extra little something on top of it that, again, like Cockroach Poker Real, gives it that extra spice. Also, like Cockroach Poker Real, I do recommend Cockroach Poker or Star Realms as the simpler version if you just want the same game and you don't really care about the differences, but you just want something a little simpler. I think Star Realms is a drop more accessible. I think Shards of Infinity, though, nicely builds upon what Star Realms is doing, and it gives you just a little bit extra as far as the way you're building a deck. You're going to have your different factions that work well together. You're trying to be mindful of that, but you also have this Infinity system as far as how you can chain to eventually just do infinite damage to your opponent. It's called Shards of Infinity for a reason. It basically takes Star Realms and does it better by adding just a little bit more interesting things on top of the game while keeping the same formula in place. From there, we have this one is arguably the one that is the most controversial as far as directly comparing it. I'll give you that. But we have Isle of Cats versus Isle of Cats Explore and Draw. Now, this is also going to be one where there's a lot of opinions saying I'm dead wrong, and I respect that. Isle of Cats is a polyomino game, and it's a polyomino game in which you're trying to gather these cats, these polyominoes, and you're placing them onto your boat for a variety of scoring goals, including finishing up sections of your boat. The core game has drafting and a bunch of other mechanisms mixed in, and then we have Explore and Draw, which takes the game and has you drawing little polyomino shapes on your board instead, but it keeps the core system of Isle of Cats in play, including all the scoring goals, and to me it does so in a cleaner fashion, at a cheaper price point, in a smaller box size, without any of the drafting, which I love drafting. It's my favorite mechanic of all time, and yet in Isle of Cats, I found drafting to be uninteresting. I vastly prefer what Explore and Draw is doing as far as laying out the rows and columns of cards and having you pick from there. I think it is the same core engine of what Isle of Cats is, but in a simpler, cleaner system that I vastly prefer. I highly recommend Explore and Draw. Then from there, we have Quest versus the Resistance, or the Resistance Avalon in my case. The Resistance Avalon was my go-to version of Resistance. It's the hidden roll game that got me obsessed with hidden roll games. I love One Night Ultimate Werewolf, I love Resistance Avalon, and I love Quest, and Quest to me has directly replaced Resistance Avalon. Now there's two ways of actually answering that. First of all, I do have the Kickstarter version of this box, which means in this box I actually have everything I need to play Resistance Avalon with the new art, so I do have that version of it. But Quest to me is a better version of the same game. It takes the core system of the Resistance Avalon, and the first thing it does is it scales it down to 4 players. So now you can play this hidden roll game with 4 players instead of having a minimum of 5, making it more accessible for people to dive into, especially nowadays where, larger groups are a little less frequent than they used to be. And I think Quest does so incredibly well. It does so with better artwork, it does so with more rolls, and it does so by reducing the player count. Overall, it just takes everything that Resistance Avalon was built upon and just makes it more accessible and also cooler looking. That's 5 down, we got 10 more to go, and we're going to go from there to Welcome to the Moon. This is what I'm curious on what your opinion is on, because I already know that Welcome to was the original Welcome to game. Then it was followed up by Welcome to Las Vegas, which I did not think did it better. I thought it did it more complicated and less accessible. Then it's followed up with Welcome to the Moon, which has 8 games in this box. There are 8 planets to go through. It takes the core system that says, hey, you didn't like the last expansion? We're going to give you 8 all at once. And you can go through it procedurally, or you can just pick whichever planets work for you and play those. It works well. It takes the Welcome to system of flipping over. It's a flip and right game where you're going to lay out 3 cards, and you're going to combine the numbers with the abilities of the subsequent cards, and then everyone's going to pick from those options, so you all have the same potential, but how you enact that potential is always going to be vastly different as you build out your own boards. What you take and where you put it is going to change up the entire game system for you. Welcome to the Moon, to me, directly replaces Welcome to, because some of the earlier maps are as simple as Welcome to, but then the game scales from there. Some of the maps get increasingly more complicated and different, and there's always going to be a few maps in this box that don't work for you. I respect that. But there's also always going to be maps in this box that do work for you. And if you find 2 maps in this box that you like, you already have twice the gameplay potential than Welcome to does, and there's 8 possible maps with a degree of legacy as well, a story based going through it and all that. There's a lot of ways to explore Welcome to the Moon. To me, I don't see a reason to recommend Welcome to, except for the aspect. I think Welcome to is like $10 cheaper, which makes sense because it has, 1 map instead of 8, so there is that fact. But Welcome to the Moon, highly recommend that one. Directly replaces Welcome to for me. From there, we have Blitzkrieg versus Caesar. Now, this is another one where I'm curious what the general consensus on this is. Blitzkrieg came out, Paolo Mori, World War II in 20 minutes, and it was an incredibly well-received game. It was a pure tactical strategy, played actually in 20 minutes, as you try to outthink your opponent in this little tug-of-war experimentation of just placing down your pieces in different lanes of battle to try to influence their outcomes and be mindful of their abilities. Caesar does the same thing. But every token you place down in Caesar instead is being placed so that you have two sides of the token that's going to two different regions. It takes the core system from Blitzkrieg and it just makes it more interesting because you're having twice the effect and twice as much to think about with every single token placed. And the rest of the game is basically the same. I also prefer the theme, by the way. I'm not into World War II games in general, and that includes thematically speaking, I'm not into World War II games. And so overall, to me, Blitzkrieg versus Caesar, Caesar's just a direct win, a game I will always recommend and play over Blitzkrieg to the point that I kind of want to get rid of Blitzkrieg. I don't know if it stays in my collection. Time will tell. Then we have Mr. Jack versus Le Fantôme de l'Opéra. Now, this is a really solid game. It's one that I've had in my collection for years. I don't know if it stays forever. I don't know. But it's one that I do frequently find myself coming back to because of how good this game is. Mr. Jack was the original game from Hurricane Games that came out. And they had Mr. Jack Goes to New York as well. They had Mr. Jack Pocket. They had a whole bunch of versions of Mr. Jack. And then they came out with Le Fantôme de l'Opéra, which I think is less well known than any other games in the Mr. Jack series, and it takes the core gameplay system of Mr. Jack, and I like it so much more. The core gameplay of Mr. Jack is all about reducing possibilities. It's all about trying to figure out how can you enact a logic puzzle such that I can't use my characters and their abilities to escape from you as you slowly procedurally reduce the number of possible suspects in a pool before time runs out. Le Fantôme de l'Opéra takes that and applies it to a different type of board, a board that's connected by rooms as opposed to by hexes, giving you interesting abilities to the characters that feel more asymmetric than Mr. Jack, and to me it's just the best version of these games. I've played Mr. Jack Pocket, I've played Mr. Jack, I've played Mr. Jack Goes to New York. I think it's called Mr. Jack Goes to New York, or it might be called Mr. Jack in New York, I don't remember exactly. But Le Fantôme de l'Opéra to me is the best version of those games. It's the one that I think is the least well known. It may even be out of print, I don't really know. But what I do know is that this one, to me, takes that core system and makes it the most interesting, makes it the most cohesive. It feels like the board was designed for the game, as opposed to, hey, we're going to have a bunch of hexes here and make the game work for the board. I love this version of the game. It's the only one I have. Once I played this one, I got rid of the others. I felt no need to own them. Then from there, we move to, I think, arguably the second most controversial as far as directly comparable, although I think you'll all agree it's directly comparable, but how comparable is more of a question. We have Caverna versus Agricola. I think Agricola was incredible. And Agricola has the distinction of having been a #1 game on Board Game Geek versus Caverna has not, so there is that. But Agricola was incredible for its time from Uwe Rosenberg, a worker placement game with a ton of different things going on in the engine you're building, and it was well loved by many, but had critiques that eventually made their way into a newly designed game called Caverna, which does, by the way, rank more highly on Board Game Geek than Agricola at this point. Agricola had its time in the sun, but Caverna kind of took it over. It added a bunch more mechanisms to the game. It let you focus on getting points through a variety of things as opposed to having to evenly distribute your focus in different ways. It gives you more ways to approach the engine so that the game has the same approachability to those who want to do a certain thing with it, while also giving you more ways to engage in the engine if you didn't want to, specifically engage in that type of farming approach to it. You're going to be pillaging for weapons, you're going to be improving your weapons, diving deeper into the mines, planting gems, you're going to have your animals and your crops, you're going to have it all in this game, and a ton of variability from the tons of tiles, the building tiles you're trying to enact. To me, Caverna is the... Oh, and feeding your people is less punishing. It's still punishing, but it's less punishing in the game. Overall, Caverna to me took all the things, and I liked Agricola. I liked Agricola a lot, but Caverna took all the things I liked about Agricola. It made the things I liked better, and it took away the things I didn't like as much, or minimized the things that I didn't like as much. To me, Caverna is directly, this is the kind of game that you can expect to see a play this, not that, Caverna versus Agricola at some point, but that's not today. Today we're just going to talk about the fact that Caverna is better than Agricola. Much better. Fight me on it. Next up, we have one that is actually replacing two games. Although I still have those two games, I don't know if I'm going to get rid of those two games. I like all three of these games. We have Framework versus Nova Luna versus Sagani. All three of these games, this is the other game on the list that is from a different publisher. You see, Framework, Nova Luna, and Sagani are all from a different publisher, but they all have the same designer, ironically Uwe Rosenberg. That sequence wasn't planned over here. Uwe Rosenberg is the designer of all three of these games, and I challenge you to play these three games and tell me they're not comparable. They all use the same basic mechanism where you are drafting tiles into your own personal grid from a public display, and you're taking those tiles, and each tile is both helping you accomplish the goals of other tiles while being a goal to other tiles in itself. So they're both giving you goals and accomplishing goals in the same time. Your goal, your puzzle, is to try to figure out which tiles can you most cohesively match up as you draft these tiles from the public grid in a way that gives you the opportunity to clear out your private goal pile before others do. That's the whole game. To me, Framework is better than Nova Luna and Sagani because of the fact that it is the simplest and most accessible in the series. All three of them are excellent, and all three of them do something different to the point that I still do own all three, but if I had to keep one, it wouldn't even be a question, it would be Framework. To me, Nova Luna is fantastic, and it gives you a more interesting mechanism in the selection of the tiles because of the way the grid system works. Sagani is a more slightly different version of the way the tiles point at one another, which can lead to non-adjacent things going on, has an interesting spin to it. But Framework to me is the one that I can teach you in 3 minutes. I can get you up and running in 3 minutes, and it gives me the same basic gameplay puzzle, and it has those interlinking chaining frames in a way that to me just makes it the best of the series. I can understand why Nova Luna and Sagani have their own merits, but they also are more complicated and take a little bit more to actually teach someone what's going on, versus Framework. I can teach you this game in 3 minutes. 3 minutes we can be up and running, and then play it in 20 to 25 minutes. It's a great game. Whereas the next one on the list is one that actually has 2 games, as opposed to Framework kind of replacing 2 games. The next one has 2 games replacing other games, and that's going to be the Zombicide genre. You see, right now we have Zombicide Undead or Alive over here, and this is the one on the table for a reason, but in terms of what's available, if you've played Zombicide games, to me, Zombicide Black Plague and Zombicide Undead or Alive are the definitive versions of Zombicide, and this is obviously going to be a personal choice, like everything on this table over here, but to me, they are the best in the series. Black Plague gives you the biggest zombie variety in the game, and Undead or Alive brings the heat, brings the difficulty in a way that no other Zombicide has done for me, and between the two of them, we have the best iterations of Zombicide as far as I'm concerned. Zombicide 1, 2, and 3 are okay. Zombicide Modern is way too easy. Zombicide Invader is good, but I've never even lost a game, so there's a lot of things going for it, but I've never lost a game. Then we have Zombicide, Night of the Living Dead, which I haven't played, but I've also heard it's way too easy. And then we have Marvel Zombies, which we're not going to talk about because it doesn't exist yet, but for right now, Zombicide Undead or Alive and Zombicide Black Plague are the 2 games I'm going to recommend here. The reason I'm pulling out Zombicide Undead or Alive on the table is because that's the one that's more in print and available right now, so in terms of you trying to get your hands on stuff, this is the one you're going to have an easier time getting your hands on stuff, and to me it is one of the best versions of the Zombicide system. And then we have, before we dive into the last, number 13 over here on the list is going to be Brass Birmingham versus Brass Lancashire. Both Brass Birmingham and Lancashire are fantastic games, and Lancashire is the original, but Birmingham to me streamlines a few small aspects. It gets rid of a luck system in Lancashire, and it also adds a little bit of variety as far as how the distant markets correlate to the spots on the board, giving you just enough of a reason to both improve it's an improvement in the reduction of luck, and it's an improvement in the slight variety, taking a good system and making it better. I think both are fantastic, but there's a reason Brass Birmingham has climbed to the number 1 spot from these 2 games, or the number 2 spot on Board Game Geek, but the number 1 spot from these 2 games, and it's because of the fact that it takes an amazing system, and it just makes it marginally better, and marginally better was all it needed to be in order to take that spot. Then the next, actually that was number 12, not 13. See, number 13 over here is the giantest box on the table. It's not on the table for a reason, but that's going to be, give me a second here, Assassin's Creed versus V-Sabotage. V-Sabotage is an excellent game, make no mistake, and it's V-Sabotage, previously known as V-Commandos, is an excellent game that had a spot in my heart for a long time and still is in my collection, and honestly, between the 2, I don't even know which one I keep. I think I keep Assassin's Creed. I don't imagine I keep both. It's too much game to keep both. But I think I keep Assassin's Creed, but I'm not certain. And part of the reason I'm not certain is because Assassin's Creed does it better, in my opinion. I don't think that, to me, it's not a debate. I think Assassin's Creed does the V-Sabotage system better. It takes a good system, it takes a great system, and it makes it just enough better, and it has an IP, it works well within the IP, and all in all, I think that I recommend this game more so. And they have a cheaper box version of it as well. This is the Kickstarter Deluxe. They've introduced a more retail version that is a little more accessible. The only hesitancy I have is that this one is a campaign game and V-Sabotage isn't. Or say V-Sabotage has the option to play as a campaign, but has the option to play a single shot, and that introduces a degree of accessibility that might make it a better fit for your collection, but I just think Assassin's Creed does it better. I think it takes a great game, and I think it makes it better, introduces it a bit of difficulty in how accessible it is, but when you do actually play it, I think you get the better system in Assassin's Creed. My numbers 14 and 15 over here, the last 2 games on the table, are going to be ones where I'm going to be showing you the original game because the new ones I don't yet have. And the first of those is going to be Tainted Grail, The Fall of Avalon versus, sorry, while I try to knock things down here, Tainted Grail, The Fall of Avalon versus Tainted Grail, Kings of Ruin. I think both of these are excellent storytelling games, but Tainted Grail took the feedback from Fall of Avalon, Kings of Rune I should say, took the feedback from Fall of Avalon, it took all the things people loved, and it doubled down on those, and it took the elements people didn't love, such as the grind and the menus and all that, and it said, we're going to make that system a little better. And it did so. Both these games do the same basic concept. Both these games are operating the same basic system, to the point that I believe they're releasing an upgrade pack to make Tainted Grail Fall of Avalon backwards compatible with the new system. I'm not certain. They had an upgrade pack. I don't know if it did that or not. But to me, Tainted Grail Kings of Rune is just the better version of Fall of Avalon, taking a gameplay concept that has done tremendously well, that entered the top 100, that was well received, and just making it better. But I don't yet have it on the table. I have played it, to be clear, but I don't have it on the table. And then my last one, number 15, is another one of those where I don't have it on the table. I've been waiting anxiously for it, but I am waiting for 7th Citadel, which to me directly takes all the things that 7th Continent did and makes it better, with some weirdness thrown in. There's a small caveat there. 7th Citadel from, oh my gosh, what's the name again? The name is Serious Pulp. 7th Citadel from Serious Pulp took the 7th Continent system, and then it said, we're going to make it more personal. We're going to make you more invested in the system. We're going to take a deep dive into what's happening, more choice, more agency, and it's not going to be just about the exploration, but it's going to take the system we have in play over here and make you feel like you're a bigger and more important and more relevant part of that system. And it did so in a way that made me, this game that I love, it made me just want 7th Citadel over 7th Continent. I think 7th Continent is fantastic, make no mistake, but I think 7th Citadel took the system, and there are some aspects about it that are weird. That's the only, when I mention the weirdness, I mean that some of the theme from 7th Citadel is resonates a little less with me than the theme of 7th Continent. But the way it made me feel like I'm a part of the story, as opposed to feeling like I'm just exploring some land, that pulled me in a way that took the core system, and for me, just made it better. And that's what I have over here. 15 different games, 15 different experiences, 17 if you include Azul and Santorini, but I'm not, whatever. 17 different games and experiences. Let me know where I'm wrong. Let me know which of these you think I'm completely dead on. Like Zombicide Invader maybe is the best Zombicide. Maybe Agricola really is better than Caverna. And maybe Brass Lancashire is the better of the two versions. I'm curious about your opinions and why on these. To me, these all took great games. These all took good systems, and they are just directly better, to the point that most of these I don't own the originals of. I own the original 7th Continent. I own V-Sabotage. But Zombicides, I only own the two that I mentioned over there. Brass, I got rid of Lancashire. For Shards of Infinity, I got rid of Star Realms Frontiers. I am debating getting rid of Blitzkrieg. I got rid of Quest Avalon. I still have Welcome 2, although that's a debatable one. I got rid of Isle of Cats. Most of these games, I got rid of the ones that inspire them, and the few that are left standing, I still look at wondering at what point do they go. In any case, then until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. Hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.